Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're at. This is lesson number 10, and this is on crime scene searching. Very important class. Even as a patrol officer, you're going to be doing some searches. So what's the goal of a crime scene search? What you're looking for evidence, obviously. What is evidence? Well, evidence is something that's going to relate to the crime that you're investigating. So anything unusual, anything out of place, maybe a stolen item that you're looking for. Those kind of things are what you'd be searching for. You have to handle the scene as evidence itself. So when you enter, let's say, a residence to search for something, first of all, do you have a legal right to search? Do you have a legal right to be there? Something very important to understand. If the suspect has any standing, as they call it, any right to privacy in that location, you're probably going to need a warrant. Sometimes a waiver will suffice, but you have to be careful with those. There may be another party, a wife, or a brother, or somebody else that would also have standing and may later become a suspect, and that could create a problem. So, best just to get a warrant, especially on any major crime. So, think of safety for yourself. That's something that everybody needs to think about. So you would always have your rubber gloves, your protective gloves. Wouldn't be a bad idea to have protective eyewear and even booties on a major crime scene. And you would probably have help with that. You'd probably have homicide or major crimes detectives and lab people handling that search. But still, you need to be very careful that you're not destroying any evidence or contaminating any evidence. If you remember back to another lesson, we talked about that in patrol procedures. When you arrive, you got to protect the scene, if you remember. That's probably where I want to talk about this term called the theory of transfer. No one can walk into a house or walk into a room or walk into a store without there being a transfer of evidence. So they're either leaving something at the scene or they're taking something with them. To explain that a little bit, let's just say they may leave shoe prints on a tile floor. They could leave fingerprints, obviously, on a counter. They could leave their hair fibers, clothing fibers. They could actually take items when they leave. They could have carpet fibers on their shoes, possibly. There's been a number of major crimes solved with carpet fibers found at the suspect's location or in their vehicle, those type of things. So that's the theory of transfer. You can't go in anywhere or come out of any place without transferring something. You either leave something or you take something. Even outdoors. It could be shoe impressions, broken grass, blades, those type of things. Or fibers could be left, even in a field or in the brush, that type of thing. So the theory of transfer is something you need to be aware of. I would say the warrant is almost always needed. We've already covered that. So you need to kind of be prepared for a search. Let's talk about what are we searching for. Let's take the fact that we're looking for a 42-inch flat screen TV that's been stolen. And you have established probable cause, and you've got a warrant approved by a judge to search for this, Vizio 42-inch flat screen TV. So you'll get back to the scene. The scene's been protected, or maybe this is your first time to arrive. And you walk in, and there's the TV sitting on a coffee table right there in the living room. Well, your search is over. You collect your TV, and you're pretty much on your way. Now, before you leave, there's officer safety issues too. So when I say you've got your TV and you leave, you would still search the house for other people just for officer safety issues. But you can't continue searching for anything once you've recovered that television. But let's just say right there on that coffee table, there's also a mirror with some white residue and a razor blade and maybe a syringe. And you also see these small Ziploc jewelry Ziplocs, 50 to 100 of them in a rubber band. So that would indicate that possibly this person is dealing drugs. You've got this white substance on the mirror. You've got the syringe, razor blade, looks suspicious. You could field test that. That's in plain view. That's what they call plain view doctrine. So even though you weren't searching for that, it's right there by the television that you're recovering. So you could field test that and it comes back as cocaine. The field test, the presumptive test, is that it's cocaine. So with that and the fact that you've got these small Ziploc baggies, would be an indication that possibly this person is dealing in cocaine. So you would have to stop your search right there and go get a second warrant. You'd have to establish probable cause. And that may not be probable cause, what I've just told you. Now, if you check this person's criminal record and you see that he's been arrested before for distribution of cocaine or even possession of cocaine, you might have enough probable cause to create another warrant, go back to the judge, probably the same judge, and could use part of your first affidavit and then just add to it what you discovered, the white substance, the field test, etc. And once you've got that second warrant, you can come back with the scene secured the whole time and continue searching. Now you're searching for drugs, cocaine. Now, working narcotics for quite a while, we did a lot of narcotics searches, and those made it very easy. Obviously, if we're looking for the 42-inch TV and we didn't see it right away, and we have a warrant for it and it's all legal, we can't be opening drawers in the bathroom and looking in cabinets and things like that because a 42-inch flat screen TV just couldn't be in there. So keep that in mind. You can't search somewhere where that item couldn't possibly be. But in this case, now we've come back with the second warrant. We're looking for drugs. They can be anywhere. So that was one of the good parts about being a narc and doing scene searches, looking for drugs. We could search everywhere. Small containers, you name it. We could look in everything. And we found unusual items and evidence in some unusual places for sure. I'll try to touch on that. So keep in mind when you first enter on any search that you're not going to destroy any evidence. You're not going to contaminate anything. You probably want to use the same pathway in and out. And then even once you've got your warrant, you're going to want to be very careful not to disturb anything. And the way I usually did my searches on a house inside was I would either go counterclockwise or clockwise around the room and one room at a time. You wouldn't wander all through the house. Again, for officer safety, that would probably already be done. But I would go, and for some reason I kind of went counterclockwise most of the time. It would depend on the room. But I would start searching everything against the walls in a counterclockwise fashion. And then I would move to, coffee table or furniture that was in the center of the room. That's a pretty standard way of searching. You want to search everywhere. You're only going to get one chance at your search, and you don't want to find out later that you've missed something. And that happened to me a few times. Embarrassing, but it happens. So you do the best you can, try not to miss anything. You don't want to learn later that, oh, this was in the house and they came back and now it's removed and it's lost. You have no rush, so take your time and try to find everything that you're looking for. Don't forget to look up. That's something I learned fairly early. Let's just say now, let's go away from the burglary and the drug scene, and let's say we've got a shooting or a murder, and there's been a gun involved. Oftentimes there's high velocity spatter of blood somewhere in the room. Very common. So don't forget to look up. Now, in a murder case, you as a patrol officer are probably not going to be doing the search, but still you might be the one who notices it first. And if you do find something like that, obviously in a murder, you're going to have the detectives there and probably a lab to assist you. Keep in mind those 3 I's that we talked about: information, interviews and interrogations, and instrumentation. Well, that's where the instrumentation comes in, is a lab tech collecting the blood spatter, photographing the blood spatter, taking measurements, those type of things. And a blood spatter expert can learn a lot about where the victim might have been when the projectile hit them and this blood spatter occurred. And that's a 2 or 3 day class just to get the basics on learning that. Not for you to worry about right now, but something to be aware of in general. So if they're bringing in luminol or some chemical to find blood spatter or semen maybe, you would want protective gear on. You want probably a face mask, eye protection for sure, because that stuff is not good for you. Let's keep that in mind. We used luminol for many years before we learned that we needed protective equipment. So let's move on to, you've done your search, you've got your evidence collected, and you've cleared the scene. You have to leave a list of everything that you've removed from the house. And you will have your own list that will go back to the court with your warrant. Your warrant has to be returned to the court listing everything that you've recovered from this search. But you also have to leave a list for the owner of the house. So in the collection part, you're going to be marking things. You're wearing your gloves, of course. You're sealing evidence, your date and time, who recovered it, where it was recovered from, those type of things. You're going to have evidence tape. You're going to have paper bags. You're going to have plastic Ziploc bags. A basic little kit you should have in your car. So keep in mind that list has to be left at the house. So let's go back to kind of why we're doing this. What are we looking for? We're looking for evidence. What are we trying to establish with this evidence? Well, corpus delicti, for starters, the fact that a crime has occurred or something related to that crime. The modus operandi, the MO, the method of operation of the suspect. Let's say it's a burglary and the back door is kicked in, so that shoe print on the door would be very critical. Maybe there's a rash of those in the neighborhood. That might be matched, that shoe print could be matched possibly with other burglaries, so you realize you've got the same perpetrator. So the MO, method of operation, and of course the identity of your suspect or evidence that would lead you to that suspect. So those are the 3 things, those purposes of the search. The corpus delicti, the fact that a crime has occurred, modus operandi, the method of operation of the suspect, and something to identify the suspect or tie them in with the crime. Let me touch on some of the strange locations when you think about searching. I have found evidence. Of course, many times I was searching for drugs, sometimes guns, blood spatter, you name it. But a lot of searches related to drugs. But I found drugs and paraphernalia in diaper bags. I found them in attics. I found them in refrigerators and freezers. I found them taped under drawers, crawl space, pockets of clothes hanging in the closets. That was an unusual one. But put some drugs in a jacket pocket that's hanging in a clothes closet. You got to go through every piece of clothing that's in there. Dirty clothes. You dig to the laundry basket and find your little bag of drugs or a little kit that they carry around with them hidden in the dirty clothes. Obviously under the mattress, under the doghouse. Found a gun and a shooting one time under the doghouse in the backyard. Light fixtures. That's, again, looking up is important. We found drugs many times in light fixtures in the ceilings. So just think, where could things be hidden, especially the small things? Another kind of interesting thing, we always felt when we were searching for drugs and narcotics, and keep in mind that vice and narcotics detectives are kind of a different breed, if I can say that. We always felt that once we found the sex toys or the pornography, that we'd done a pretty good search, because that stuff is usually hidden about as well as the drugs are. And we found that stuff probably more often than we found the drugs. And there were times when we missed some drugs and learned about it later through informants or even the suspects later when they were arrested. We haven't touched on outdoor searching. That's a whole different world. If you're out in the field and you're searching, let's say, for a gun, you're going to have some type of system put together, and you're going to need a lot of help. If you're covering a large area, a real common method is kind of a grid search, where you have a line of people, maybe 4 or 5 feet apart, depending on what you're looking for, and you all walk in a line across the area, and each guy is responsible for a certain area, and you slowly, methodically search for whatever you're looking for. If you don't have as many people, there's another area or method, concentric circle. You could start maybe in the middle of the area that you want to search and just go in small circles, which get larger and larger to the outside of the area. If one person had to search, let's say, a parking lot looking for a casing, a spent casing from a gun, that works pretty well if you're alone. Or a big section could be divided in a number of sections, small squares, maybe 20 foot by 20 foot areas, and you've got a lot of cops to assign to this area, and everybody has their responsibility. Always make sure we know who's in charge. Something I missed, I should have covered earlier. Who's in charge? Who's in command of this search? And that person directs everybody, whether it's the basic patrol officer that first arrived, or if it's the sergeant or a major crime detective that has arrived later. Who's in charge, and you follow their lead. That's really about it. I would just remind you from another lesson to go back and think about those 3 eyes. You're looking for information through the search. You're looking for, you may get that information and some leads from interviews and interrogation, which again, we don't use that word anymore, but more thorough interviews. And instrumentation, that's where we're analyzing the hair fibers that might be found, or the carpet fibers, or the blood spatter, those type of things. Keep in mind, a lot of items will need to be measured so that they could be relocated if you had to reconstruct the scene. Remember, we talked about the word reconstruction in another lesson. So before removing anything, everything's photographed. Each room's photographed. Items of interest are photographed. Lots of photographs We've gone over that before. And a lot of times measurements, especially if a gun or a knife or something like that is found, you're going to be able to relocate that. And we'll talk about those type of things in another class. So before anything's collected, it's documented by photographs, maybe measurements, and possibly a diagram eventually. So really that's about it. For the patrol officer, keep in mind, like I said in the patrol procedures class, that many, many times that first officer that arrives on the scene is the one who gets the information or finds the evidence that actually solves the crime. So that's it for today. I'll be back with another lesson very soon. Have a good day.